Welcome to the Gigless Podcast, a podcast showcasing the works and talents of those who lost their gigs due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This podcast will feature a range of creatives from the tri-state area who are young visionaries and who contribute to the craft despite the recent events that have happened. Join us today as our host Remi Leibovic speaks with Rory D'Lasnow, the singer-songwriter from Teaneck, New Jersey. Rory is a singer-songwriter who's played at various New Jersey venues, such as Debonair, and has been on tour in North America. As a performer, Rory can be heard with his band Black Rose Revival, or as a solo artist. You can check his music out and keep up to date with his projects in the bio of this episode. Enjoy.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Gigless, a podcast about everybody who lost their gigs due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we are joined by Rory, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because I don't want to be embarrassed.
D'Lasnow.
D'Lasnow? Okay. Sometimes there's an accent like D'Lasnow, so I was like...
Not to my knowledge in this case, but I've heard it pronounced many different ways by many different people.
Oh, that's good. Well, I always want to pronounce someone's name correctly. So Rory is a local musician in the North Jersey area, and he plays a lot of alternative rock and a lot of alternative music, and you can catch him usually at local places, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about yourself. When did you start getting into music?
Sure. So I've been playing since I was a little kid, probably in about kindergarten or first grade. My dad, who played a little bit of guitar, showed me how to play. And I picked the guitar up the wrong way, upside down and backwards. And I've been playing that way ever since. And I started writing songs from grade school and just been writing throughout my life. But for the most part, I didn't gig out consistently until about 2018. And since then, I've been kind of trying to make up for lost time, playing out as much as I can.
So what are your primary instruments?
I play a little bit of piano, but predominantly guitar, both acoustic and electric. And I sing.
Yeah. Oh, so we were talking a little bit before we started recording. Can you tell our audience who you're inspired by?
Yeah, so I'd say two of my primary influences are Taking Back Sunday and Jimmy Eat World. I also try to emulate, a wide variety of things, the Beatles, Queen, but a lot of that, emo, so to speak, is where I draw inspiration from.
What does your typical gig look like for people who've never seen you live?
Yeah, so I'm trying to play more with my band that I've been putting together called Black Rose Revival, but prior to that, like generally speaking, it's me on acoustic guitar solo. I've played a couple full band shows on electric, but predominantly solo acoustic, and usually your typical 30 to 45 minute set. Standard.
Yeah. And you were talking about recently you did a little mini tour.
Yeah, I've done a couple little mini tours. I played in Baltimore, Philly, and DC, and then I had been planning to go to Buffalo and Rochester, but the Rochester one got snowed out. But I did play in Buffalo as well.
Do you drive yourself, or do you have a van, or like what's the deal with that?
It depends. So the Buffalo and Rochester one, I did it with my friend. I was also a musician, Jackie June, and we also played in Baltimore, Philly, and DC together. But I did a Baltimore, Philly, DC run in my car just by myself as well. That's one of the perks of being solo acoustic. You don't get all the same dynamics and all the same energy, but it is a little bit more portable.
Yeah, because I don't know, the typical viewpoint of someone, from someone that never has seen like a touring band or knows anyone that tours, like everyone has this idea of everyone going into this like Scooby-Doo like van and getting and hitting the road. And
that's the dream.
So,
Yeah,
Definitely.
I'd like to do that kind of thing down the line as well with my band, but as it stands, or as it's been so far, it's just been me and my Honda Civic with my acoustic guitar in the trunk, just kind of making a run for it.
Absolutely. And so do you play typically smaller venues or larger venues?
It really depends. One of the places I've played at a bunch is called Debonair Music Hall over here in Teaneck. I think they're like 300 capacity. The Revolution Music Hall in Long Island. It's a little bit larger. Some touring bands go through there. But there's also been obviously smaller venues as well. Sometimes the smaller venues end up being really cool, like Rockwood Music Hall in the city or Pianos. I think they both probably fit under 100 people, but a packed small room is sometimes better than a little bit smaller crowd in a big room.
Yeah, can you go into that? Because we were talking a little bit before at the show, and I think our listeners would like to hear that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely say some of my favorite gigs have been ones in small rooms. I think we were talking about a house show in Philadelphia that I played that was just awesome, really engaged crowd and supportive, and especially with the acoustic music that I do, it's very like emotional, and at least I hope it is, and it means a lot to me to be able to connect with people about that, and those kinds of settings tend to lend themselves to connection and relatability and whatnot.
Yeah, it's definitely a different, as someone who attends a lot of local shows and smaller shows, but I also attend like big mainstream names, it's
Yeah,
definitely a different energy. I feel, for example, when I see shows at like big venues, so this is a Jersey complex like Homedale or BB&T, I feel that there's a lot of people, especially on the lawn, that are detached from the main show.
yeah,
Whereas if you see like a basement gig or like even a gig at a bar, it's just a little bit more intimate because the people that are there that want to be there are like there. They're not just there to like, get drunk and hang out with friends. Maybe they are, but like, they're interested more in the music.
yeah, absolutely. I'd say like the nice sweet spot is I've had a couple of gigs where I opened for larger headliners. Like I opened for Drake Bell from Drake and Josh, and I opened for Lee DeWyze, who won American Idol. And both of those shows had like a larger built-in crowd because of the draw that they brought. And I mean, they convinced some of my friends who were on the fence to come out as well. So I think we had like, I know I had like 50 to 70 in both of those, and there were people who were obviously there just to see them as well, who were in the room. So when you can have a big room like that and a big crowd that's interested, that's like the real sweet spot.
Yeah. So can you tell me about the build up so far to where we are presently? Because it's presently March 26th when Rory and I are recording this. Um, what was the buildup before you found out that you lost your gigs due to this whole COVID-19?
Well, it had actually been a lot of build up. So as I mentioned before, I started in my first like big show, so to speak, was October 10th, 2018. I played down the street in Teaneck at Debonair. And I've been trying to, in the beginning, make it that I had like one big gig a month. That was like my goal. And then things really started taking off, and I was just playing a lot of smaller gigs and then the occasional big gig. But this year, as I started to go into 2020, I started to book some really big things that kind of fell into my lap. I got booked for the AC Beer and Music Fest as one of, I think, four acoustic acts on the same night as the same session as Newfound Glory in the early November. So that was like definitely going to be like the biggest gig of my life. It was really just, I think it's just the five of us. So it's like a festival, but it's not like Bamboozle where you could be playing like 10 hours earlier in a completely different part of the Meadowlands or something. So that one's been rescheduled as of now. It was going to be in April, I want to say. It's all, my brain has gone to sleep with everything getting thrown up in the air, and it's been moved to the end of the summer. So that was like a little bit of a bummer, but at least it hadn't been entirely canceled. And then I had been working toward this show at Mercury Lounge, which I haven't announced yet, but that's potentially up in the air, and that's like a really, really big venue. So I guess you could say that things were starting to, my ducks were finally in a row, and then things got thrown up in the air.
Yeah. But I'm sure that when everything gets sorted that they'll come back, because clearly these people that are event organizers, like, they clearly see that you're talented and that they want you. So I don't think that they're just going to let you go like that.
Hopefully
Um
not.
yeah,
There's so many things that need to fall into place to get certain events to work out right. Like I think the AC Beer Fest will be all right, but certain venues you have to kind of like, or it's easier if you put together an entire bill of musicians, of acts, and then propose it to the venue. So there are a lot of different cards that had to fall into place quite right, just right. So, but there's reasons to be hopeful for sure.
yes. So recently you were on that little mini tour,
Hmm.
and you told me that, I don't know what the date range was, but you were in Atlanta and you were
Yeah,
talking about that.
I was down in Atlanta with my friend Jackie June, and that was just in early March, and we just got back right before this started to get intense. People were definitely aware of it, and they were trying not to shake hands and stuff, but it was nowhere near as um, you know dire as it is now. Because I mean, if it was just a week later, we probably would have had to have scrapped the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And was that your last show on that tour?
That was actually just a one-off. Jackie asked me to play with her on guitar, so it was actually Jackie's show, but I was accompanying her. So
Yeah.
that
And
would have been tough to do with this ramping up.
absolutely. And taking a more introspective look, like, do you mind if I ask, how have you coped with this whole
Sure.
thing?
Well, I mean, it's been really disappointing, especially for someone in my shoes. Not trying to feel sorry for myself or whatever, but realistically, there are always those moments that are like, geez, I was just starting to get a little bit of momentum after taking off for so long, and trying to focus on things other than music. um I'm worried. I'm more worried about public health and are we going to be okay, but a secondary concern is like, is this going to throw off momentum? But to cope with it, I've been just trying to focus on all the people who have been doing a lot of live stream shows, who have been just really supportive. I've done a few myself. I've started to do some regular shows every Monday, and I'm going to start to do them on Wednesday as well with some of my musician friends. But that's been a source of um, reassurance and excitement, because you go on Instagram and you just see people making music all day, and it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. I think that, so just so you know, we will be posting where people can find you in our show notes. So
Oh,
don't think that
thank
this
you.
is a one-off thing. So I'm gonna stalk you down and post you up.
I
So don't
appreciate
worry
it.
about that.
Yeah.
Um, absolutely. So, you know, that will definitely be a thing that more people can go and find your live shows. Are you going to be playing with other people, or are you just going to be doing a mix of you and a friend? Because Instagram Live and Zoom and all these other things, there's so many possibilities that we can deal with right now.
Yeah. So the plan right now is every Monday I'll be doing just like an hour by myself, but every Wednesday I'd like to pull in a couple of my musician friends to join on the Instagram Live um, stream. So I don't know if it'll be like a collaborative thing, because I think there's always like a little bit of lag that can make it difficult. But I'm really excited about the possibility of going back and forth. Maybe I play a song, they play a song, and just kind of supporting each other, because there are a lot of great musicians that are geographically far away from here who I have relationships with that I'd love to play with, and now we can do it without traveling across the country.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And have you put any thought into expressing yourself in different ways, like maybe going into other forms of art or music?
Hmm. Yeah, not particularly, because I'm just not really that geared toward like visual art. For example, I would be like absolutely atrocious at every time I've tried to draw anything in my life, it's ended poorly. But yeah, just basically doubling down on the music, you know.
That's excellent. Are you going into other genres then with it? If I could rephrase my
Huh.
question?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been. Let me put it this way: I've been listening to a lot of different stuff as I've become more familiar with other artists. So I
Mhm.
think that tends to impact my writing as well, and the songs I might want to cover, things like that. So yeah, I would say that this focus on the arts has sort of reoriented me toward different kinds of genres.
What is something that you've been listening to a lot lately?
Been listening to a lot of this band called Conversing with Oceans. They're from the Bronx. Uh,
Ooh,
yeah, they're super good. And they're a little bit more like indie rock than where I usually the music I typically make. So hearing more of them, they just released an album. Um, I think that could lead to some kind of creative, different creative direction, or trying things out in a different direction.
absolutely. I think that right now a lot of people, at least the people that I've been interacting with musically, music wise, they are all looking for new people to listen to,
Yeah,
and they actually have time now to listen to more local, more not so much mainstream, but like more things that they just miss in the average day before
yeah,
this whole thing hit.
yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
That's been one of the few benefits of this entire disaster. Having
Yeah.
time and being especially exposed to different kinds of art.
So you're Bergen County based, right?
I am, yeah,
Yes. So you're in the heat of this whole pandemic. You're
definitely.
definitely,
Yeah,
Bergen County will allow shows and gatherings to be open once this whole thing passes, like large shows or gatherings.
yeah. I'd imagine that once it passes, people are going to be twice as eager to try to get back on track.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think that another thing that I asked one of my other guests is, do you think, and as you said earlier, that everyone's going on Instagram and making music, do you think that we're going to have another like SoundCloud independent artist wave?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that myself. If this kind of thing might continue. I think so. I mean, I think there's been enough changes to the way that people are playing gigs and the way people are interacting with music, that there may be some long lasting changes once things clear up. And I kind of hope
What
that
do you think?
they do. What's that?
What are you, sorry, what are you hopeful for?
I mean, I'm a little selfishly motivated here because I'm hoping that there'll be more of these collaborative virtual shows, because now I'm going to be playing on Saturday with some really talented singer-songwriters from Seattle. And I actually had been planning to, boy, I'm just giving away all kinds of information I hadn't anticipated to, but I'd been planning a show in Seattle in May, which is also maybe up in the air. But, obviously it's a lot easier to collaborate with people from Seattle when you don't have to fly to Seattle to do it. So having the opportunity to connect with people across the country virtually is pretty cool. So I hope that that can continue to happen.
I think that it's definitely going to make artists and musicians and performers utilize the internet
Yeah.
more. I think that, and do you think that this is also a positive in the sense that it's giving access to people who never had access to a show?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because even though like I've been pretty fortunate with booking shows, knock on wood, thus far, this show that I'm going to be starting a series on Wednesday where I'm trying to have like a little showcase. Um, I'm finding that people that I've been saying I want to play with, I can just hit them up and be like, "Hey, do you want to play?" And we can do it. And we don't have to worry about ticket sales or, does the venue have the state available? So yeah, I mean, I would imagine that that is the kind of thing that's applying to a lot of people's circumstances. People who maybe couldn't get a show in general, or weren't quite ready, can ease into it. And then people who could get shows but just couldn't well, that they couldn't deal with the politics of it, but they don't have to deal with the politics of it, because there's always
Yeah.
a lot of pressure to sell tickets and whatnot.
Can you go a little bit more into detail about that? Because some of our listeners, I don't think, like, I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about,
sure.
but with my friends and their bands. But can you talk to our listeners, maybe people who don't go see local shows, about like what it really is to put on a local show, you know?
Yeah. Oh, it can be really tricky because in defense of the venues, they need to sell tickets and they need to have heads, buying drinks and eating food to stay in business. But as an independent musician, it can be really difficult to get a show if you don't have a crowd that you can guarantee is going to come. I've yet to have a situation where a venue has straight up said you can't come back because you didn't draw enough people, but it's definitely a thing that occurs. And that's something I'm not trying to ever encounter
Wow.
because it's a reality.
I never knew that they were going to be like, don't come back. I just knew that you had to sell tickets to,
Yeah,
bring in a show. I didn't know it was like, oh, if you cannot sell these, you
I've
cannot come
definitely
back
heard
because,
horror stories. Yeah. I mean,
oh
even
my goodness.
situations where
And
a musician does a great job and everyone walks away satisfied, including the booker or the talent buyer, and they say, "Listen, I liked you, but like, we can't have you back because you said you'd bring 30 and you brought five." But at the same time, there's a
ooh,
lot of people lying about what they can bring in, and that's not cool either. Because if the
that
venue
is,
can't afford to exist, then you're screwing the whole scene basically.
yeah, there's that balance. So what do you feel then, I guess, about open mics then?
That's actually a really good question. I love them. And I've found that especially open mics where you can get like a featured slot, um, those can be really beneficial. When I first started, I thought, well, open mics are what I used to do, and now I'm doing shows. Not to be arrogant, but I think part of me was like defensive about it. I was like, I don't want to go backwards, but it's really not like that because when you go to open mics, you meet other musicians, you get a little bit of exposure, and like I said, these featured slots sometimes exist where they'll have someone play a little longer, and you don't have the pressure of selling tickets.
So let me ask you about that. How did you get the confidence to start this whole thing?
I don't know. I think I just was tired of procrastinating. I was about to turn 30 and that like I don't know what quarter life crisis essentially something like that was happening and I was like, all right, I know I've always thought in my heart that I was a musician first and foremost, but I thought about all of the possible things that could go wrong and all the ways that it was silly and somehow I went from someone who was literally like trembling at open mics to someone who was playing in front of like 100 people and felt no nerves at all. I just feel excitement.
That's
So just
great.
biting the bullet, I guess.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people, especially like our listeners and people that may not have ever been on stage before, that it can be really intimidating, but once you kind of get up there and you get out there, like the shame is gone, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like going into the
That
pool.
shock.
If you put your toe in and think about it too much, you'll psych yourself out. But if you jump in, it's usually all right, I think.
Yeah, and I think that going back to the conversation about access, I think that this is going to be excellent because you have people like the singer from Green Day. he's going out and having concerts in his living room. And this is another band out there, but Dropkick Murphys is very popular, and they did, for their entire existence, they played shows on St. Patrick's Day because they're a bunch of Irish guys from Boston.
Right.
But because this happened on like the weekend before St. Patrick's Day and they shut everything down, they played actually a live concert that anybody could go see.
I saw
and
that.
They streamed it on, they streamed it on Facebook. So you had all these people that like never saw, I've never seen a live, Dropkick Murphys concert, but I was able to see a live Dropkick Murphys concert.
Right. Exactly. I mean, and I think there's two things that are dope about that. One, it shows people who are starting out just how real these people are. Like I saw Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie do a live stream from his home studio or whatever on Facebook, and I was like, wow, that's that dude that was on stage in front of like millions of people, and he's just like me, I mean, maybe a little bit more successful, just a little bit, but but it sort of makes you realize that these people who are killing it put on their pants, one leg at a time. And then also, if people are doing this live streaming thing as a step in that direction, one of the most critical things for me gaining confidence was making friends and networking. And once I did that, I felt like there was a sense of community. So I'm hopeful that people who are just starting out can get that sense of community so they feel emboldened once there's an opportunity to play in front of a live crowd.
Absolutely. I think that one, I just want to say that I love Death Cab for Cutie.
Yeah.
And because when we were going off and it's like, name all the bands you like, I was like, oh God, the book.
Oh yeah, no, same here. I was like, oh, there's so many, I don't know.
I know. So I really like Death Cab for Cutie's collaboration with Chance the Rapper.
Yeah, I heard that. That was wild.
Yeah, they have a really good, on Chance's latest album, they have a really good song. I can't remember it. Let me look it up. But
such an odd collaboration, but it works.
And that's what I really love about musicians that are able to bend and flow into different, spaces. And the fact that like what you're doing right now, where it's like, we don't usually collaborate, but let's see what happens.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that we're getting that more than ever, especially with this whole thing.
Yeah, it's enhanced the sense of community. And I think going back to your question about what was the difference maker in terms of going from playing like sporadically to playing consistent shows, I think the sense of community was actually the biggest turning point for me, having that support. So hopefully this can bring that about for other people.
Absolutely. The whole point of this is to showcase people who lost their gigs and to bring the sense of community together, because I believe that, especially just for those listeners who have never met me, I have a lot of friends who are in local bands. I have a lot of friends who are professional performers, professional artists, professional musicians, in the sense that gigs were their main sources of income. Basically, the arts got postponed. Everybody in my circle really felt it. And it was just that kind of moment where we kind of all looked at each other, not physically because we weren't in the same room, but we all kind of just had that sense, we're all in this together and we need to see what we can do. And my background is I went and I have a degree in graphic design and digital studies. So all the graphics that you see are done by me. And this whole idea, like I called up Dane and I was like, hey man, let's make a podcast.
Cool. Love it.
And the song is called Do You Remember by Chance the Rapper and Death Cab for Cutie off the album The Big Day.
Right.
I was so happy when I heard that album and I heard them and I was like, they did it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So where do you see, because we're getting near our marker, where do you see yourself in the near future? Like any new projects, expanding on some projects, different ways of exploring?
So I have 3 singles that I'm working on simultaneously. It just happened to work out that way based on opportunities that came up. but 3 solo singles I'm really hyped about. But the number one thing that I'm excited about is my band Black Rose Revival further developing, because I've been working with the drummer, my buddy Sergio, and this bassist Greg. We had a little bit of like a lineup change before we had a chance to play out, but the songs are, dynamite. I'm biased, but I'm more excited about that than I've been about anything.
Well, at least your band has a drummer, because I feel like every New Jersey drummer I meet is in like 7 bands.
That is true, yeah. And my drummer's only in 1, so we're lucky.
That's great.
He's killer.
That's
awesome.
So exclusive.
Yes.
And that's excellent that you have, hope for that. And so we can be expecting something from you. When do you think these singles are going to be done?
The single should be done within the next couple months. I mean, I'll be releasing them regardless of what's going on with live gigs. I had been hoping to sync up one of them with this giant birthday show I was doing, but my birthday's in June, so we'll see if it lines up all right.
So are you a Cancer?
I'm a Gemini, which means I'm absolutely insane.
Great. Yeah. I don't have anything against honestly, I really don't have anything against Geminis. A lot of people think that Geminis are like really bad. Yeah. But I'm
Same,
just so that
or you can say.
You think they're bad?
I do. I think I'm nuts. Not as bad as Scorpios. I'm not sure what you are, but
ooh, I'm a Virgo.
Okay. I don't have anything bad to say about them.
So I'm a Virgo, and my producer Dane is a Libra.
Okay. Do those signs not go together, or?
They go to, like, so my typical friend group consists of like at least my girls and I, like it's all Capricorn women, other Virgo women, a random Aquarius. And yeah, for the most part, it's just like, and then some like Leos and some randos, but for the most part, it's always like Capricorn and Virgo.
Good. Stay away from those Scorpios. Just kidding.
Oh boy. A lot of people actually think that, I know this is getting into astrology, but a lot of people think that Scorpios and Cancers, they get them mixed up. Like they're like, oh my God, you're such a Scorpio. And they're like, I'm a Cancer, because they're both very heavy emotional signs.
I see. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
This is an astrology podcast, right? I got punked into coming onto an astrology podcast.
That would be great. Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm excited. And I just want to announce too that, Dane and I, my co-producer, we're going to be, after this whole pandemic is over, we're actually going to be following up with people like in a year to see where everybody's at. So don't think that we're like releasing you back into the wild, or back into the air, should I say.
Yes.
Get an air sign?
I'm with you.
I could definitely talk astrology, but like when people are like, get into their whole birth chart and your moon sign, I'm like, I mean, you got me right. I am a Scorpio moon. So
Okay. Fair enough.
There you go. But yeah, so thank you so much, Rory, for coming on our show.
Thank you for having me.
It was great to have you. And we'll definitely post every single place where you can find Rory. Rory, if you want to give it off again where people can find you.
Sure, yeah. Number one place is on Instagram, which is just instagram.com/Rory D'Lasnow. I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/Rory D'Lasnow Music. And then Spotify, if you just look up my name, Rory D'Lasnow, you'll find me.
Thank you for listening to the Gigless Podcast, hosted by Remi Leibovic and produced by Dane Wagner. The song used for our intro and outro is Beach Walk by Unicorn Heads. If you enjoyed this podcast, head over to our social media pages on Instagram at Gigless Podcast and at our website, giglesspodcastblog.wordpress.com. There, you can find out more about the artist, contact the host and producer, and find out more about our schedule. Thank you.